Imagine launching a multi-billion-dollar corporate empire today, and your opening strategy involves delivering your product using parachutists.
Right, just a totally normal business model.
Completely normal. And then forcing utterly bewildered pop stars to perform on the pitch, just getting totally booed by thousands of people.
Oh, and don't forget having your top talent, eating fish and chips on a bus right after their shift.
Yes. It sounds like a pitch for a satirical movie, but that is the literal origin story of the most lucrative sports league in the world. Welcome to our deep dive.
Glad to be here.
So today we are taking a fascinating stack of sources for you. We've got a beginner's guide to the Premier League, an economic breakdown of its global dominance, and this highly nostalgic behind-the-scenes retrospective from 442 about its inaugural 1992 to 1993 season.
Which is just a wild read, honestly.
It really is. Our mission for you on this deep dive is to look at the massive chasm between what this league is today and how it started. We want to understand the exact mechanisms of how a financially risky, frankly almost amateurish breakaway league managed to transform into the most watched, multi-billion-dollar sports monolith on the planet.
Because when you look at the final product today, it just radiates this inevitable polished success. But diving into these sources reveals an absolute flying by the seat of its pants gamble. I mean, it could have easily bankrupted everyone involved.
To really appreciate the sheer absurdity of that gamble, we have to establish the scale of the modern behemoth we're talking about. Today, the Premier League structure is simple but incredibly intense. You have 20 teams playing 38 matches each season.
And you've got that constant, terrifying jeopardy of promotion and relegation with the championship tier right below it.
Exactly. Plus, a talent pool that features absolute global superstars. Guys like Rodri, Erling Haaland, Mohamed Salah. And the broadcast reach is insane. Our sources note that matches are shown live in 189 of the 193 UN-recognized countries.
Yeah, that level of global saturation is just unprecedented. But the economic engine powering that saturation is what's truly fascinating here. A lot of casual observers assume the team that wins the league just gets a massive lump sum, like some prize fund from a vault somewhere.
Right, like a giant check at the end of the season.
Exactly. But the Premier League doesn't actually have a specific prize fund for the winner. Instead, the entire financial ecosystem is built on a system of massive central payments tied to television revenue.
And reading through the economic breakdown, I found the distribution of that money to be surprisingly, almost socialist, for lack of a better word.
It really is.
It's based on a sliding scale, depending on your finishing position. The champions receive 20 times the basic merit payment. The second-place team gets 19 times, and it slides all the way down to the bottom club getting 1 share.
Which is the secret genius of the whole operation, if you think about it. Look at other major European competitions historically, like La Liga in Spain. The top 2 or 3 teams would negotiate their own television deals.
Oh, right. So Real Madrid and Barcelona just hoarded all the cash.
Exactly. Which kept them incredibly strong, but left the rest of the league impoverished. The Premier League's central payment system means that even the team finishing dead last takes home an astronomical sum of money.
Which means that the team in 20th place can actually afford to buy a world-class striker. A guy who might just score a game-winning goal against the first-place team on a rainy Tuesday night.
And that distribution model mathematically engineers unpredictability.
Yeah, it keeps things exciting. But to get to this polished financial engine, we really have to go back to 1992. And I always assumed the 1992 breakaway was about prestige, creating an elite European-style super tier of football.
A lot of people think that.
But looking at these sources, it reads less like a noble sporting endeavor and more like a ruthless corporate heist.
Corporate heist is honestly the perfect way to phrase it. In 1992, the top 22 clubs in England decided to just broke away from the Football League, an institution that had been running for 104 years.
A whole century of tradition just tossed aside.
Yeah, and it was about one thing and one thing only: television money. The top flight clubs realized they were generating the vast majority of the viewership, and they were tired of sharing that television revenue equally with the dozens of smaller clubs in the lower divisions.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the Football Association actually backed this breakaway, which feels like a massive conflict of interest to me.
Oh, it completely was.
The FA claimed it was in the, quote, national interest, because they eventually wanted to reduce the top league to 20 teams to avoid player exhaustion for the World Cup. But they conveniently left out the fact that 14 of those 22 top clubs had already secretly signed up for an independent breakaway league months earlier.
He was totally cutthroat behind closed doors.
So it's basically like leaving a secure corporate job to launch a massive tech startup, but you're funding it with a credit card that's already maxed out.
That is a brilliant analogy. And that ruthlessness really set the stage for the bidding war that changed sports history. You have to remember the landscape of television in 1992.
Right, mostly just a few terrestrial channels.
Exactly. So ITV, the established terrestrial broadcaster, puts an £84 million offer on the table for the rights to this new league. For a terrestrial network, that was a massive, highly respectable bid.
I was trying to work out the math on what happened next, and it just feels like a total panic move. You have Alan Sugar, the chairman of Tottenham Hotspur,
Who, crucially, also owned the electronics company that manufactured the satellite dishes for a struggling new broadcaster called Beaskie.
Yes. So Sugar literally calls Sky's chief executive from a hotel lobby and tells him to blow ITV out of the water. So Sky bids an unprecedented £304 million over 5 years for the exclusive live rights.
It was an astronomical number for the time.
But at the time they made that bid, Beaskie was losing £10 million a week.
Funding a massive tech startup with a maxed-out credit card while your bank is actively on fire.
Exactly. How did they justify that?
What's fascinating here is that if we connect this to the bigger picture of media history, Sky's executives weren't actually being irrational. They were executing a battering ram strategy.
A battering ram strategy.
Yeah. In 1992, nobody wanted a satellite dish on the side of their house just to watch reruns of old movies. The only way you force a consumer to adopt expensive new hardware is by offering them something they absolutely must watch live.
Oh, well, they can't wait for a VHS tape because the score will be spoiled.
Precisely. Live, exclusive sports content was the only viable battering ram to force dish subscriptions. So they were betting the entire survival of their company on this league.
And because they were in for £304 million, Sky couldn't just broadcast the same old muddy football. They had to sell this league to the British public as a totally new, revolutionary entertainment product.
They essentially had a blank piece of paper to reinvent how the sport was presented on TV.
And their first attempt to fill that blank piece of paper was, well, it was heavily influenced by American sports broadcasting, which didn't exactly translate to the traditional English football fan.
That might be the understatement of the decade.
Sky released this hyper-produced TV advert to hype up the launch, scored to Simple Minds' song Alive and Kicking. They tried to make it look like a Hollywood summer blockbuster.
It was so over the top.
You had Arsenal's goalkeeper David Seaman making diving saves in his own back garden. You had Aston Villa winger Tony Daly pumping iron completely shirtless, which Daly himself later joked was one of the most homoerotic things ever put on television.
Yeah, that scene was something else.
And then you had the notorious tough guy midfielder Vinnie Jones using a hairbrush as a mustache in the locker room. Plus, groups of players taking showers together.
They were desperately trying to manufacture crossover appeal for a broad family audience. They wanted the Premier League to feel like primetime soap opera drama mixed with elite athletics.
But you look at Vinnie Jones holding a hairbrush on TV, and you have to wonder how the guy on the terraces in 1992, the guy who just wanted to watch a tough tackle in the rain and have a tie, reacted to being treated like he was at a glitzy pop concert.
Not well, mostly.
Because the gimmicks didn't stop with the TV ad. When the actual matches started, Sky tried to completely Americanize the match day experience. Our sources detail match balls being delivered onto the pitch by parachutists.
Which is just so absurd.
They hired cheerleaders, called the Sky Strikers, to dance around fireworks before kickoff. So they tried to turn English soccer into the Super Bowl overnight. Do the actual diehard fans buy into this razzmatazz?
This raises an important question because the short answer is no. Fans actively rejected it. And the attempts to integrate live music were just universally disastrous.
Oh man, it was so bad. The Scottish electro-rock band, The Shaman, got mercilessly booed off the pitch at Highbury by Arsenal fans.
Which you'd think would be a lesson, but no.
Nope. Then you had the pop group Curiosity Killed the Cat, who decided to wear Chelsea shirts while performing at Southampton Stadium, right before Southampton played Chelsea.
Just a complete staggering lack of understanding of tribal football culture. You do not wear the away team's colors in front of the home fans.
It's basically a cardinal sin.
Truly. But this is a crucial pivot point in the story. Sky quickly realized that the diehard fans hated the gimmicks. The fans didn't want cheerleaders. They wanted the sport they loved to be treated with intellectual respect.
Right, they wanted real analysis.
Exactly. And the turning point for the broadcast actually happened away from the pitch with a segment called Andy Gray's Boot Room.
I love the origin story of this segment and the sources. It was literally born out of Andy Gray, who was a former player and a TV producer sitting at a bar. They were using brown beer bottles as defenders and green bottles as attackers to discuss the tactical breakdown of a keep.
Yeah, and that beer bottle conversation evolved into Gray sitting in front of a WTO, a little tabletop football pitch on live television.
Yeah, just physically moving pieces around.
Right, moving pieces to talk through the previous weekend's tactics. It completely shifted the perception of the sport. By treating the tactics like a complex game of chess rather than just a chaotic brawl, Sky proved that respecting the fans' intelligence was the real key to mass appeal.
Okay, so the television presentation is rapidly modernizing. It's becoming this slick, analytical product, but the actual players on the pitch are still caught in this massive culture clash.
Oh, it was night and day.
You have the dawn of modern sports science colliding head-on with old-school, working-class pub habits. And the 1992 player lifestyle was truly from a different era.
The concept of sports science was virtually non-existent for most teams back then. Professional recovery was practically an alien concept.
The sources paint such a vivid picture of this. Everton players, after running themselves into the ground for 90 minutes on a freezing Monday night, would just load the team coach up with crates of beer.
Yep, crates of beer and fish and chips.
Exactly. They'd stop for fish and chips on the highway, and that was considered top-flight recovery.
And it was culturally enforced, too. Players noted that if you didn't play well, you didn't go out to the pub after, out of shame. But if you won, heavy socializing was just the expected norm.
And the managers were arguably worse. Dave Bassett, known as Harry Bassett, the manager of Sheffield United at the time, he decided to throw a full Christmas party for his team.
Oh, this story's incredible.
Complete with a massive turkey, all the trimmings, and Bassett himself dressed up as Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Which sounds delightful, except he did this in August.
The logic there is completely flawless, of course.
His reasoning was that his team, historically, only played well after Christmas. So he figured if they artificially moved Christmas up to August, they'd trick their own psychology and start the season playing well.
Visionary, really.
And the crazy thing is, it actually worked.
Yeah.
His striker, Brian Dean, who was covered in tinsel at this August Christmas party, went out and scored the first ever goal in Premier League history 5 minutes into their first game.
It's a hilarious anecdote, but that archaic pub culture was about to hit a brick wall, and the catalyst for that change was the influx of foreign talent.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Into this incredibly insular world of fish suppers and August, Santos arrives a tiny vanguard of international players. In that first season, there were only 13 foreign players in the entire league.
That's tiny. But those 13 players acted as a shock to the system. And the standout example, the man who arguably changed the DNA of English football forever, was Eric Cantona arriving at Manchester United.
Cantona was a total revelation, not just in how he played, but in how he approached his job. The sources mention that his teammates at United were initially very skeptical of him, mainly because he constantly refused their afternoon offers to go down to the pub or play snooker.
He had no interest in that. Instead, he was treating his profession like an obsession. He was the first to arrive at the training ground. He stayed late every single day to practice crossing and shooting, running drills at full match pace while everyone else was showering.
But it wasn't just his physical dedication. It was how he psychoanalyzed the geometry of the game. In 1992, English football was almost exclusively a rigid 4-4-2 formation.
Right. 2 banks of 4, tackle hard, and play long balls over the top.
Exactly. But Cantona drifted into the space between the midfield and the defense, what they call the hole. English defenders literally didn't know whether to step up and tackle him or drop back and cover. He basically broke their tactical geometry.
And he forced his teammates to see the pitch differently, too. A young Lee Sharp talked about having conversations with Cantona, being absolutely fascinated by how Cantona broke down every single action on the pitch with a distinct philosophy. He wasn't just playing on instinct, he was calculating.
Brian Giggs, who was just a teenager at the time, talked about watching Cantona spot weaknesses in the opposition fullback's positioning just during the pregame warm-up. That level of cerebral preparation completely inspired a whole generation of English players to elevate their standards.
And it wasn't just the elite teams like Manchester United adapting. Even the old-school managers realized they had to evolve or die. Take Dave Bassett, our August Christmas party manager.
Did he finally embrace sports science?
He did. He realized that Sheffield United couldn't compete financially with the bigger clubs. So, to find a tiny 10% edge just to avoid relegation, he introduced sports psychologists and modernized team nutrition. He was pioneering marginal gains out of sheer financial survival long before it became a corporate buzzword.
So English football was essentially turning into a real-time football laboratory. The influx of international stars and coaches was blending cultures and styles. It took a uniquely English, slightly archaic, physical game and began molding it into this highly technical, globally relatable spectacle.
Yeah, but we have to be careful not to view that 1992-93 season through rose-tinted modern HD glasses. Because despite Cantona's professionalism and Sky's millions, the actual physical product on the pitch during that first year was incredibly gritty.
Oh, it was a literal construction site. Let's talk about the stadiums, because this is a vital piece of context. Following the tragic stadium crush at Hillsborough in 1989, the government commissioned the Taylor Report.
Which mandated massive changes.
Huge changes. The main mechanism of that report was completely outlawing standing terraces and mandating that all top-flight stadiums had to be all-seater venues.
Which meant that as the Premier League was launching this glitzy new broadcast product, half the teams in the league were playing in half-built stadiums. You literally had heavy construction happening right behind the goal lines.
I read that goalkeepers were complaining that they felt completely lost on the pitch because there were no fans behind their goal to use as spatial reference points.
It was a mess.
Arsenal tried to fix this aesthetic nightmare by erecting a massive multi-story mural of painted fans to cover up the construction site at their Highbury Stadium.
Oh, the mural. That did not go well.
It backfired spectacularly. It became hugely controversial because the mural didn't feature any black fans or women, which forced the club to publicly confront its own cultural blind spots right as they had Ian Wright, a black striker, as the biggest star of their team.
And while Sky was dreaming of this massive global audience, the actual domestic crowds weren't exactly bursting at the seams yet either.
Not even close. In January of that inaugural season, Wimbledon hosted Everton on a freezing Tuesday night in front of just 3,039 people. To this day, that remains the smallest attendance in Premier League history.
Wow, just 3,000 people.
Yeah. And the most memorable thing about that game wasn't a beautiful Cantona-style goal. It was Everton's Ian Snodden starting a massive multiplayer brawl on the pitch, realizing he was in over his head and getting caught on camera literally crawling away on his hands and knees where everyone else threw punches above him.
It was pure, unadulterated chaos. But when you analyze why the Premier League succeeded globally compared to, say, the Italian Serie A, which was the dominant tactical league of the 90s, that chaos was actually a massive selling point.
Really, the chaos was a selling point.
Absolutely. Italian football was slow, highly defensive, and ended in a lot of nil-nil draws. English football was fast, physical, mistake-prone, and incredibly dramatic.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
History was being made in these really strange, flawed ways. Take Mark Crossley, the Nottingham Forest goalkeeper. He holds the incredibly dubious honor of scoring the Premier League's first ever own goal. Just a complete mistake.
But then he redeemed himself.
He did. Later that exact same season, he also became the only goalkeeper in history to ever save a penalty kick from the legendary Matt Letizia. The duality of the league right there. Terrible mistakes and brilliant feats happening in the same game.
And that dramatic tension birthed some of the most enduring mythology in sports. Most notably, the concept of Fergie time.
Oh, the Fergie time origin story is incredible. Yeah. Manchester United were desperately trying to end a 26-year wait to become English champions. They were playing Sheffield Wednesday in April. They're down 1-0 late in the game. The title is slipping away. And then the referee pulls a calf muscle.
Just out of nowhere, which completely halts the momentum of the game because it took them ages to find a qualified replacement referee from the stands to run the touchline.
Just a fan out of the stand.
Yeah, a qualified official who happened to be at the game.
That is wild. So that bizarre delay resulted in the new referee adding 7 minutes of injury time to the end of the game. 7 minutes was unheard of back then. And in that chaotic window, United's captain, a center back named Steve Bruce, powers in 2 late headers.
The scenes were unbelievable.
Their assistant manager, Brian Kidd, literally falls to his knees on the pitch in a suit and tie, screaming. Manchester United wins 2-1. That late, incredibly dramatic window of extra time forever became known as Fergie time, after their manager, Alex Ferguson. who had a habit of aggressively pointing at his watch to intimidate referees.
That moment broke the psychological barrier for the club when they finally won the league title a few weeks later, ironically without even kicking a ball that day because their rivals Aston Villa lost. The entire United team descended on Steve Bruce's house and partied until 4 a.m.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? How does a league with half-built stadiums and players crawling out of fistfights on their hands and knees become the billion-dollar giant we see today?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the chaotic unpredictability of that era wasn't a bug, it was the feature. Because anyone could beat anyone on a rainy Tuesday, the sheer intensity made it highly exportable entertainment.
It's a better story to sell to a neutral fan in another country.
Exactly. And as the international broadcasting rights grew, they eventually surpassed the domestic rights in value. This created a massive, self-sustaining economic loop.
Right, because more global viewers meant more broadcasting money. That massive injection of money meant English clubs could buy the absolute best players in the world from other leagues. Better global players meant an even higher quality product on the pitch, which drew even more international viewers, driving the TV rights up again.
To put real numbers to that loop, Sky's original terrifying gamble in 1992 was £304 million. By 2015, just to retain their share of the UK TV rights, Sky had to pay £4.2 billion.
Billion with a B. That is a staggering return on investment.
It is. And the genius of the Premier League's global expansion isn't just television, it's digital integration. Look at the phenomenon of the Fantasy Premier League.
FPL is an absolute global obsession.
It is a masterclass in global fan engagement. You have over 11 million people playing it worldwide. The brilliance of FPL is that it forces a fan sitting in America, Asia, or Africa to care deeply about a mid-table fixture.
Oh, definitely. A fan in New York will wake up at 7 a.m. stressed about whether Fulham or Brentford will keep a clean sheet just because they have their defender in their fantasy team. It weaves the daily narratives of all 20 clubs into the daily habits of millions of people globally. We start in this deep dive looking for the connective tissue between a massive £304 million gamble in a hotel lobby and the polished global economic engine that exists today. And what the sources reveal is that it wasn't a clean, meticulously planned corporate straight line.
Not at all. It was built entirely on trial, error, and a lot of luck.
It survived terrible pop band performances, stadiums missing entire stands, and a culture that thought fish and chips was high-performance fuel. But the core product, that blending of gritty English physicality, the tactical geometry brought by foreign geniuses like Eric Cantona, and the egalitarian financial structure that ensured any team could win on any given day, created a spectacle that the world just couldn't look away from.
But as we look at the immense scale of the league today, the sources also highlight some looming future challenges, specifically regarding financial sustainability and the identity of the clubs.
Yeah, that brings up a fascinating tension. The next time you tune into a match or you check your fantasy Premier League lineup to see if Haaland scored, remember that it all started with a maxed-out credit card gamble. But as the Premier League continues its relentless pursuit of global dominance, chasing international revenue and appealing to fans thousands of miles away, there is a risk.
A significant one.
Does this multi-billion-dollar machine eventually sever the emotional connection with the local working-class communities that actually built these clubs over a century ago?
It's a profound tension between the local soul of a football club and the demands of a global brand. Something for you to ponder the next time you hear that kickoff whistle.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.